Hello, and welcome to Mailin It, the official podcast of the United States Postal Service. I'm Karla Kirby.
I'm Jeff Marino. For this episode, we're digging into our latest true crime case from the files of the U.S. Postal Inspection Service. And this one involves an audacious attempt to steal one of the most famous properties in America, a former home to rock and roll royalty. The property we're going to be talking about is none other than 3765 Elvis Presley Boulevard in Memphis, Tennessee. You probably know it better as Graceland.
It sounds like the plot of a heist movie. To guide us through this unbelievable story, we're joined by U.S. Postal Inspector Jan Bodón, who is central to unraveling this case. Inspector Bodón, welcome to Mailin It.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, before we dive into the details of the Graceland case, could you give our listeners just a quick overview of what actually happened here?
Yeah, absolutely. So in this case, the case began in May of 2024. We had local Memphis news media and national media reporting that Graceland could potentially fall into foreclosure. Specifically, the company Mailin Investments and Private Lending was claiming that Lisa Marie Presley, who had passed away in 2023, had entered into a loan agreement with Mailin Investments for the amount of $3.8 million. Mailin Investments is claiming, or made the claim, that Lisa Marie Presley defaulted on the loan and they had the rights now to foreclose on Graceland.
Well, stealing Graceland is a pretty bold move. So how did Mailin Investments claim that they owned the rights to the property? What were they going to do with it?
So what Mailin Investments did is they created the foreclosure paperwork, and then they had to, by law, mail it and give notice to Promenade Trust, who is the entity that governs Graceland. So they mailed the foreclosure notice to the Superior Court of California, where it was filed, and they also mailed it to Riley Keough, Elvis Presley's granddaughter, who also is part of Promenade Trust, and notified them that Graceland was going to be foreclosed on by Mailin Investments. Once they received the notice, once Riley Keough and her attorneys received notice, they filed for an injunction against the foreclosure process immediately. And the injunction was granted.
Okay, so a federal investigation actually got started about this. How did this wind up in an inspection service case?
I've been a member of the Postal Inspection Service's DOJ mail fraud team for many years. And over the years, I had worked with trial attorney Christopher Fenton. I should point out that once the injunction was granted in Memphis, Mailin Investments just walked away from the foreclosure process. So I thought that was strange. Christopher Fenton also thought it was strange, and he stopped by my office and said, "You want to look into this case with me a little further?" He and I had already worked together when I was a member of the Postal Inspection Service's DOJ mail fraud team. The DOJ mail fraud team has created a stellar reputation on being able to efficiently and thoroughly investigate hard cases and lead to numerous successful prosecutions in complex white-collar crime cases. So we had that relationship there already. I absolutely said yes, and we started looking into it because we both thought it was very strange that a company who made a claim of losing $3.8 million once a court granted an injunction, no attorney, no representative of the company went to court to argue why they did, in fact, have rights to Graceland. They just walked away.
So some red flags there from the beginning, huh?
Absolutely, absolutely.
You've got a company that seems like it's fake. You probably got some forged documents, but that doesn't seem like a lot to go on. Where does an investigation go?
You're correct. We had the creditor's claim, and so we asked the attorneys for Promenade Trust if they would be willing to send us the documents that they had received from Mailin Investments. So it appeared that the individual responsible for this fraud was trying to use Graceland's fame to lend credibility and legitimacy to their foreclosure claim. This ended up backfiring because Promenade Trust, their attorneys, filed for the injunction. Nosany Investments backed away. It made us suspicious as the federal government, and so we decided to start investigating. We were able to get the fraudulent creditors claim, and that provided us with a ton of leads. It provided me with P.O. box addresses, telephone numbers, emails, and names like Carolyn Williams and Kurt Nosany. And so when I started an investigation, I'd like to envision a funnel. I start out with a large potential number of leads, a large evidence, and I start gathering evidence and start looking at all the leads that I'm getting. And slowly, as I gather evidence and I organize the evidence, I'm going to get to the narrow end of that funnel and be able to see who's responsible for this crime that I'm investigating.
Are there any particular tools you've got to narrow this funnel?
Yes, I relied on Postal Service databases as well as law enforcement databases to do background checks on Nosany Investments, Kurt Nosany, and pretty quickly I was able to find out that even though they had a digital footprint, they really did not exist in the physical world. I was also then able to focus on the P.O. box and the P.O. box application associated with that P.O. box address that I have found in the creditor's claim. In there, I was able to identify additional information that helped me move the investigation forward.
So just out of curiosity, where was the P.O. box located?
So the P.O. box was in a small town that I was absolutely not familiar with until this investigation. It's named Kimberling City in Missouri.
So that is a really long way from Memphis. How did you connect those dots and start to identify an actual suspect?
What I ended up doing after reviewing the application was trying to match information on the P.O. box application with information that I had already found in the creditor's claim. The fraudster in this case, they could get away with creating the name Kurt Nosany or the name Nosany Investments, but when you're renting a P.O. box, you have to use real information. And so I was able to rely on that real information and confirm telephone numbers, match email addresses that I had seen before. And then I also picked up a new name, Lisa Finley, as well as matching some names that were authorized to receive mail at that P.O. box, such as Carolyn Williams and Kurt Nosany. We also had, I found a name that I did not recognize, but I was able to track it down to a roommate that Miss Finley had in the past. We tracked him down to Chicago, and then I went to interview him in Chicago.
What did he say about the situation?
He was able to corroborate quite a lot of the information that we already had. He was also able to tell us that he noticed Miss Finley was very mysterious and careful who she would let in a room where she kept all her tablets, phones, and that type of information, or products, electronics. And so that was helpful for us during the search warrant to have that information. He also told us that when he was walking by in the kitchen, he noticed some prescription bottles. And when I asked him if he remembered the names on the prescription bottles, he said, yeah, some of them were Lisa Finley, but others were Lisa Holden. That got me to go back to law enforcement databases looking for information on this new name that I had. And pretty quickly, I was able to realize that Lisa Holden, Lisa Finley were the same person.
So that's pretty incredible. This suspect created a really big web of people and identities, but she seems to have left you a pretty clear trail of breadcrumbs to follow. How did you close in on her?
Once I had all this information, telephone numbers, email addresses, P.O. box addresses, I was now able to send out subpoenas to internet service providers to find out who actually created the account for these emails, who was in control of them. I also was able to send subpoenas out to telecommunication companies to find out who was in control of that phone number or phone numbers that I had uncovered during the investigation. When you create an email, you have to provide a recovery email, and you have to provide other data points that have to be real. And when we got the subpoena productions back, that's what we were able to identify, that the same data points that I had found in the P.O. Box application were also the same data points that I was seeing in the telecommunications subpoena productions, as well as the internet service provider subpoena productions.
I also understand you found out the documents were forged as well.
Yes, I contacted the notary public based on the stamp that was provided in the documents. And she was in Florida. She was able to confirm that she had never met Lisa Marie Presley, that she had no part in the notarizing of the documents that were sent to Promenade Trust, and that her stamp was used without her knowledge. She did not know how the stamp was used because she had it in her possession, but it was not her, and she had never met Miss Presley and had not participated in the notarizing of that document.
Interesting. It sounds like all the signs were pointing back to Lisa Findley.
So, you spoke with the notary. I understand that the media was also involved. Can you let us know how that impacts this type of investigation?
Yes. Fortunately, I spoke of a investigative funnel earlier. At this point, it had narrowed down to where I could see that Lisa Janine Finley was the person responsible for this crime based on the P.O. Box information, the email accounts, and witness interviews, among other evidence that I had gathered. I say luckily because I understand the national media, they're trying to get to the bottom of the story, but when they go out and they interview the potential suspect and they put it out into the ether, the suspects usually will be aware of it and they'll start to cover their tracks. A lot of the times, our federal investigations are conducted covertly for several reasons, but mainly so that the suspects are unaware that we are onto them and they don't try to start to destroy evidence in order to cover their tracks. So it was a little bit of a challenge at that point, and we had to amp up the speed of our investigation so that we could collect evidence and arrest our suspect without the suspect fleeing and without the suspect destroying the evidence.
So I understand in some instances, suspects may also try and deflect blame to other folks. Was that an issue with this case?
The suspect, Miss Finley, got very creative there. She actually sent emails pretending that a Nigerian fraud group was responsible for this entire scheme, this entire mail fraud scheme. That actually backfired on her because when we executed the search warrant, we found phones, and in those phones, when the forensic analysis was done, we found some of those emails that she had sent out trying to get us to not be on track anymore and get us off her path.
So it sounds like the press attention kind of gave her a heads up that you guys were starting to close in, and that's when she started trying to cover her tracks.
That's correct. She did that. There were reports that a federal grand jury had been convened to investigate the crime as well. And all of this started to spook her, and she made different efforts in order to try and cover her tracks or get us off her scent and think of maybe another potential suspect.
But you guys weren't swayed, and eventually you wound up arresting her. So you've built this case, and now it's time to confront her, the person who launched this attempt to steal Graceland. What happened then?
Well, we were able to obtain an arrest warrant for Lisa Janine Finley, and we were able to obtain a search warrant for the trailer that she lived in Kimberling City, Missouri. I knew as the supervisor for the DOJ mail fraud team that we were going to need additional bodies to execute the arrest and the search warrant. And I asked for assistance, and the inspectors from the Springfield, Missouri domicile did a spectacular job helping us out with both the arrest and the search warrant.
What did you find in the trailer?
In her trailer, when we first knocked, she pretended that she didn't know why we were there. She was arrested, and she was taken to the marshals. In the trailer itself, we found tons of evidence. We were able to find handwritten notes with information on Graceland. We were able to find a computer tablet that was actually open to the federal court docket for the Graceland investigation. We also found shredded documents in a wastebasket. And we collected the wastebasket, the shredding in the wastebasket, and submitted it to our forensics lab. I've got to give them some type of gift as a thank you, because as you can imagine, putting together shredded documents is not easy. But they did, and they went through the painstaking effort of doing that. And it actually helped us in the investigation to show that, in fact, Miss Finley was the person that we were looking for.
And then even after she was arrested, apparently she still continued to incriminate herself.
She did. It's not uncommon for me to, once someone's arrested, to start listening to their jail calls. Even though they get a recorded message letting them know that the phone call is being recorded, usually they will say something that actually incriminates them even further. And in this case, Miss Finley was talking to a girlfriend and asking her to go into her bedroom. She apparently had a large 80-pound bag of cat food, and she had stuffed a phone halfway down that bag of cat food. So in the recorded phone call, I'm listening to her give her friend directions on where this bag of cat food is and how far down she has to go to get the phone, and then providing her instructions on what she needs to delete from that phone.
Well, she just kept digging a hole for herself. So she was charged with mail fraud and aggravated identity theft. What was the final outcome?
She maintained her innocence initially. In those recorded phone calls, I also heard her sister, who actually had a federal criminal history, tell her, look, if the federal agents, if postal inspectors or any other federal agent arrests you, usually it's because they have gathered all the evidence by now. And so she eventually decided to plead guilty to the one count of mail fraud. Her sentence was 57 months and 3 years of supervised release. Some of the listeners may think that the sentence is not harsh, considering she tried to steal a national treasure. But I want to remind the listeners that she was sentenced to nearly 5 years in prison for the attempt to commit mail fraud. She did not make a dollar, but her actions earned her significant time in federal prison.
That certainly is a powerful lesson to learn. So, great story, but before we let you go, this case touches on a fear that a lot of people have. Fraud, specifically someone trying to steal the title to your home, deed fraud. And we actually came across this in our last True Crimes episode. Is there any advice you can give to our listeners to help protect themselves from this type of crime?
Yes, this is a burgeoning crime, and currently there is no statewide freeze similar to a credit freeze, but you could get an alert at the county level. It's called a property alert system, and you can set that up for your property through your county recorder or your registrar or deeds office. The property alert system is going to notify you immediately if a document is filed against your property.
Well, that's good information to know.
What about just your own instincts? If something, we often talk to the inspectors and they often say something like it just feels wrong. Is that a good sense that something might be going on that's not above board?
We absolutely tell both our postal customers, number one, to avoid being a victim. If it sounds too good to be true, it usually is, right? Mm-hmm. And it's similar to, in this type of crime, deed crime, if you get a mailing that you don't recognize, that doesn't make sense, that's making some sort of, it's alluding to some financial transaction involving your deed or your home, and you don't remember this, you did not participate in it, absolutely don't just throw it in the trash. Make sure you reach out to your county recorder or the registrar of deeds. Go to the county office and try and find out what's going on.
That's a good point, because typically if you get like a phishing email and you call that sender, you end up giving all of your information to that person. So that's great advice. You're saying to go to the county, like the record of deeds, not necessarily respond to who sent the inquiry.
Correct. It's inconvenient. It's a trip, an errand that you weren't planning on. It may take you a little bit of time. You may have to be in line waiting, but it's definitely worth your time if you're going to protect your property and your home that you've worked so hard to own.
Yeah, home is usually one of your biggest investments, and certainly something you want to pay attention to.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much, Inspector Bodón, for coming in and chatting about this. This is a crazy story. Somebody actually trying to steal Graceland.
It was my pleasure. Hopefully the listeners got educated and at the same time entertained on the way the investigation unfolded, and we identified the suspect and held the suspect accountable.
You say, moral to the story, the attempt can get you 5 years.
Indeed.
All right, Jeff, it is time now for another edition of Did You Know? What's on the agenda for today?
Well, Karla, the Postal Service currently employs over 620,000 people. And in the years since its creation, that number has easily been in the millions. But not everyone who starts in the Postal Service stays there. And some have become quite notable in other lines of work.
So I remember a few episodes ago, we did talk about Abraham Lincoln and how he was the postmaster of New Salem, Illinois.
That's right. He's probably the most famous example, but today I want to talk about another big one, Conrad Hilton.
As in Hilton Hotels?
Yep. He was born in 1887 in San Antonio, New Mexico, and from 1910 to 1911, he served as the postmaster of that town. He was just 23 years old at the time and earned about $600. This was still a year before New Mexico obtained full statehood. And after that, he attended Goss Military Academy, served in New Mexico's first state legislature, and became a lieutenant in the U.S. Army during World War I.
And he did all of this before going into the hotel business?
Hard to believe, but yes. He bought his first hotel in 1919 in Cisco, Texas, then expanded Hilton operations into Dallas, El Paso, and Albuquerque, and eventually, as you know, across the entire country. After World War II, it grew internationally, becoming the juggernaut it is today, with over 9,000 hotels in 146 countries. Conrad's son, Baron, sold the empire to the Blackstone Group in 2007 for $26 billion, which means the Hiltons are no longer connected to the business other than their name. And so while his name is now synonymous with hotels, we know Conrad Hilton's journey to worldwide fame had a humble beginning, serving his community at his local post office.
Well, that was definitely interesting. So, just the audacity, that's what comes to mind when I think about, you were going to try and steal Graceland?
It's pretty fascinating what people will do for money.
And then not be successful with it.
Yeah, it's a common thread with these inspection service true crime series that it's pretty clear that they're leaving lots of breadcrumbs that the inspectors can follow and eventually get their person.
Absolutely. And I think one of the great things to take away from this particular episode was just, like you mentioned, that deed stealing that's happening right now and how people need to be vigilant, looking in the mail. And then, of course, like the inspector mentioned, go to the recorder of deeds. Do not reach out to who sent you the notice.
Good advice.
Absolutely. And that's all for this episode of Mailin It. Don't forget to subscribe to Mailin It wherever you get your podcasts to make sure you don't miss the next episode, and follow along on Instagram at U.S. Postal Service, X at USPS, Facebook, and youtube.com/@USPS.